The sound of the wind woke me up in the middle of the night. A typhoon is in Japan. This is my room. The tatami mats are terribly damaged. Tonight, I want to introduce my house. This is the longest hallway in my house. On a stormy night in Japan, a man is awoken by the sound of wind and rain on his rooftop. Since he's now awake and unable to fall back asleep, Piro Pito decides to fill the time by filming a walkthrough of his house. Although he never clarifies who the video tour is for, Piro Pito sets off and leaves his small, dilapidated bedroom to step into the longest hallway of the house. However, unbeknownst to Piro Pito, he has just entered a liminal space. For those unfamiliar, a liminal space is a man-made structure, often transitional in nature, that has been abandoned or is just disturbingly empty. Time moves conspicuously, and spatial distortions or anomalies are common. The Backroom's ARG is probably the most famous example of a liminal space, which uses these elements to evoke a deep sense of unease and surrealism, and many of these qualities are immediately present in Piro Pito's home. Judging by the building's state of decay, it's apparent that, till recently, no one has lived in this house for a very long time. The tatami mats are old and worn, as Piro Pito points out, and many of the shoji walls are in tatters. The paper sections are full of holes, and other areas are completely bare, leaving only the skeletal remains of the framing. The degraded conditions of the bedroom extend to the rest of the house, as evident by the long hallway we're first introduced to in the tour. The hallways serve as the connective tissue in this liminal space, and lead to the different rooms that make up the rest of it. This is the Hina doll room. This is altar and ancestors. When I open the Fusuma sliding door, there is another hallway. Right room is doll room. This room was closed up by my grandfather. I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that Piro Pito inherited this house from his grandparents. It's likely the house was left abandoned, and probably for good reason, until it came into his possession, and may explain, at least in part, why Piro Pito's filming the walkthrough in the first place. The tour may be for a friend who can't come to see the house in person, or maybe it's to demonstrate the building's condition before renovations because, as we can see by this footage, and from the questionable state of the bathroom, the house is in need of some major repairs. It's at this point in the walkthrough, after Piro Pito notices that he can hear the sound of sutras playing on the radio, that something peculiar occurs. This is the longest hallway of my house. We've returned to where we started, but Piro Pito is somehow unaware of this. He continues down the hallway, identifying his bedroom on the right side, and after he passes through the Fusuma sliding door, we enter again into the smaller hallway. Upon entering the second time, however, Piro Pito points out the left side room instead of the right, which he calls the dress room. Similar to the doll room across from it, Piro Pito's grandfather had sealed the room by binding the handles shut with some sort of twine, likely when or around the time he had shuttered the doll room. And a few moments later, we, yet again, find ourselves in the longest hallway. Piro Pito is stuck in a loop that he is completely ignorant of. From what I saw, there were 8 laps in total, and each time Piro Pito cycles through the endless loop of hallways, the house is altered, and somehow gets progressively more disturbing each time. This is dress room. There are a lot of dresses from my grandmother. My grandmother is not here. There are sprays of blood throughout the room, though Piro Pito says that the spots are merely holes eaten away by insects, and the other room contains a large collection of antiquated dolls. It's probably here that I should mention that dolls have always played an important role in Japanese culture. Historically, dolls were seen to have spiritual significance as a vessel to which one's misfortunes could be attached to, and could thereby ward off disasters or illness. The difference between the dolls seen here and the Hina dolls shown later is that the Hina figures belong to a decorative set. Typically only brought out around the time of the Hina Matsuri festival, the collection contains an emperor and empress doll and various imperial dolls that are arranged on a 5-tier platform for display during the celebration. Piro Pito mentions that the dolls in this room have been untouched for decades, but they look to be in relatively good condition, unlike the set we see when he enters the Hina doll room in the next loop. No one has been in this room for a very long time. These dolls are rotten. Empress doll is rotten too. Considering everything we've seen so far, I strongly believe that this Hina doll represents Piro Pito's grandmother. The Empress doll in her decayed state seems to be a sign that something happened to the matriarch of the family. Bad fortune of some kind fell upon this family, and perhaps Piro Pito's grandfather suspected that a curse was lurking in his home, which is why he sealed the rooms and the house was abandoned. Whether the grandparents' spirits are trapped, the house is cursed, or both, the forsaken atmosphere feels especially foreboding as we return to the longest hallway and are introduced to grandmother's bedroom. This is grandmother's bedroom. This room has no taste. These are grandmother's shoes. Grandmother is here. Grandma isn't looking so hot, but Piro Pito is unfazed. He continues to examine the rest of the room before commenting that, "My grandfather is not here." I hear a sutra. The same grandfather who closed up the rooms and listens to sutras on the radio is somewhere nearby. Piro Pito shows how much of the house is slowly moldering away before bringing us back to the bathroom where the floor is now covered in blood that is partially congealed and festering. There are bugs on the walls and the putrid remains of a doll in the sink. My grandfather is here. Similar to his grandmother, Piro Pito's grandfather has become a grotesque, disfigured version of himself, and, just as before, Piro Pito is completely unconcerned with the alarming sight before him. It would appear that the house has already trapped him, showing him what very well might just be his grandparents' final moments, before the building reveals just how cursed it truly is. Again, completely unbothered by the hellish nightmare that has consumed his home, Piro Pito walks into the hall, repeating the same established lines from earlier throughout the tour, although this time in reverse process. Ultimately, Piro Pito returns to the bedroom that we now know was once his grandmother's, whose spirit, I believe, is trapped in the house as an onryo. In Japanese culture, an onryo is a malevolent female spirit seeking vengeance. These spirits were often wronged in life and are capable of causing very real harm to the living. The image of a deathly pale woman with long black hair covering most or all of her face is a pervasive story trope throughout all forms of Japanese horror, including here in Piro Pito's home. At multiple points throughout his walkthrough, black hair can be seen spilling from a vase, hanging from the walls, and growing out of a clock. It's in the bathroom by the mirror, and grandmother herself has hair covering her face from under the cloth. Something terrible happened in this house, and it's trapped Piro Pito inside with the ghosts of his grandparents. Maybe it's for the best he isn't aware of it. This is my room. A typhoon is in Japan. The tatami mats are terribly damaged. Sweet dreams. Special thanks to the creator of my house walkthrough, Piro Pito, who also goes by Nana825763 on YouTube. As per usual, link can be found in the description. I strongly encourage you to check out his channel for the full video and a breakdown of how he made his horror film. Thank you for watching, especially if you've made it this far. I thought this would be a fun little analysis to do, so hopefully I was right and you enjoyed your time here. I look forward to seeing you all in the future, so please make sure you like and subscribe for more. And as always, from Suomi, with love.